To begin our Cinemagraph how-to, let's first create a new Photoshop document. So File, New, and we are going to use Film and Video. And we will use the High Definition Video 720p preset. Now, you'll notice the aspect ratio is listed at 1280 by 720, which is correct. We usually call out the width and then the height, but you'll see that this preset is 720p. So when we deal with video, we tend to call out the presets by their height. And in this case, the P means progressive. So it's a progressive scan. So our video image will build at the top and line by line progressively scan down, building our video image. Okay, so just keep in mind when you see 720p, that doesn't mean pixel, it means progressive scan. All right, so we will use a landscape mode, resolution 72, RGB on our color. I'll go ahead and leave a white background. I'm going to color manage working with sRGB, and we will leave our pixels as square. But you notice when we're dealing with video, there are other formats available to you. But we're going to work on a screen that uses a square pixel. So let's go ahead and create. So in video, just so you know, as a quick heads up, you see the guides. And what's going on here is because televisions and monitors and different screens have different pixel densities, different aspect ratios as far as width and height, you have what is called title safe. That is the inner rectangle, title safe. So if you have a title, if you have type in your video projects, you want to stay within this area. And then the outer rectangle, we call this action safe. And if there is some important element, visual, whether it be a still or it be action, you want to keep that element or elements or action within this zone. If you have content outside the outer rectangle, there's a possibility that that content will get cut off depending on the user's particular screen. All right, so we now have our document for the most part set up. I'm going to toggle off my title and action safe for the moment. And we will go now up to the window menu and we will go ahead and open the timeline. And what we're going to do is now select the type of timeline we're going to work with. So I want to use Create Video Timeline, and then we click our button, and we now have our timeline available to us. Let's go ahead and save our file. So, save. I'll save to the computer. I'm going to save it inside my Cinemagraph how-to, and this will be called Prior Cinemagraph. Photoshop file, make sure we have the layers, and we will embed our sRGB color profile. So we will save, click OK, and now so I have a little bit more room to work, I'll just bring the timeline window down for now, and we'll zoom in a little bit, and we are ready to begin work. I have opened 4 different images, and I'll click on them and you can see all of the images I'm going to use in this demo are from Pixabay, and I will make links to the images available. They will be available underneath the video. So what I want to do is collage a couple of these images together. I'm not entirely sure which one I want to use yet, but I know I want them, when I do composite them together, I want them to be similar in their color palette. So I had an image where I like the color, and I would like these tonal values to be sort of the theme of my cinemagraph as far as color. So I found an image that I liked. I cropped the image to an area that really represents the color that I'm interested in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and apply this color to each of my images. All right, so when you do this, I believe it's best if you have images with single layers. And so when you're starting a project, you're going to want to do this. You're going to want to color match at the beginning of a project. All right, so let's take our first image, and what we will do is, and just to verify, you're working with single layers instead of multiple layers. All right, I believe it works better this way. So let's go up to Image, Adjustments, and we will go down to Match Color, and you'll see this window here. We're going to go to Source, and I will find my abandoned train. And you'll see that we are now mapping the colors from the abandoned train into this image. Now, let's just note that the luminance, color intensity are both 100 and the fade is 0. I tend not to mess with the fade. I tend not to click on neutralize, but you might want to bring your color intensity up if you want this just to look slightly colorized, okay? But that's up to you. Or you can really bring the color intensity down. The same would be true of your luminance. If you want to darken or brighten an image, I'm going to go ahead and set these back to 100. And I'm going to keep these defaults and apply them to each of the images. So let's go ahead and click OK. We will go to our next image. And let's go to our adjustments again and match color. And I'll choose the source, the train. Now this one's a little dark, so I might want to make some modifications here, but I'm going to leave this one as is for now. So we'll just click OK. All right, I went ahead and modified the remaining two images, and I just want to point out, I mentioned about having Photoshop document with a single layer when you are doing this process. So if we just go back up to adjustments and back down to match color, let's just select that source again of our abandoned train. And you'll notice that you can choose a layer. So if you had multiple layers, you could choose the layer which you want to use for the color match. But I tend to just work with my documents with single layers and get my color palette all within range at the beginning of a project. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel this. As I mentioned, there's a couple different images which I like, but I believe for the background in my project, but I believe I have settled on one of these two. And I like the color balance of this one for our match color, but this one, as I mentioned earlier, might just be a little too dark. So I'm going to use history to my advantage here, since I had not saved any of my files or closed them. So let's go back to the point which we opened, and I'll go back and go to match color again, select my train, and this time I'm going to bring the color intensity up, and I'm going to try maybe about 150, 160. And if you hear some noises in the background, my cat decided it wants attention now. So if you hear my cat meowing, sorry. Okay, where was I? Okay, so we brought the color intensity up. The luminance, I'm going to bring the luminance up all the way, so 200 here. And then we will go ahead and click OK. And now we have an image which is a bit more colorized. So I like this. I'm going to now bring this into my project. And when I say this image. Now I want to bring my edited image into my project. So I'm just going to point out this is the original background, and this is after we have done the match color. Okay, so I have a couple of options, and the first is if we look at our image size, I'll see that this image is, let's just say a little over 6,000 with a little over 4,000 on the height, but the resolution is 300, which would be on par for a print project. All right, so our project is 72 pixels per inch. All right, so if I just click cancel here and we select this image, and we're going to, let's just copy this, and then we will go to our project, and again let's look at image size, and you'll see that this resolution is 72. All right, so if we edit and paste, you'll notice that this image is just a monster. And that's because all of that resolution is being brought in to this 72 pixel file, which makes the image ginormous. All right, so we could scale this down. All right, but let's look at another approach. And what we will do first is take a look at our preferences in general. And usually there is always a check by default. The check is on resize image during the place. So no matter what the image is outside of the program, it's going to be resized to be more in line with the resolution of the document you're working on. So let's just click OK. We'll go up to File and Place. I know it's in here somewhere. There it is. I don't know why I made that so difficult, but anyway, let's do Place Embedded. And I'm going to find my desert landscape, and I happen to rename it O2 Desert Landscape. So that's Place. And you'll see that my image, I'll go ahead and execute this, that my image fits as far as the height, but it's not wide enough. Now I could scale this up and all would be fine. Okay, matter of fact, let's just go and again look at our image. We'll see that our resolution's at 72. Let's now, I'll keep the image in here just so it's easy to see what's going on, but let's go back to our preferences, general, and let's take that check away from resize image during place. And this time, let's place and find our image. There it is. And place. And I'll zoom out. And I'll go ahead and execute. So here is our image, okay, with the resize taken away. And this is the image when we place it, having it resize itself to fit in our project. So I could scale this one up, I could scale this one down. You'll notice this is still pretty large, okay? And that's because it's bringing in the pixel width and height, but it's still setting it to 72 pixels per inch. Okay. All right, so just keep that in mind for placing work. You could copy paste, but you're going to bring in everything from the original point, or you can choose to have a place be scaled or to the project size, or you can bring in the original width and height, but the resolution will be scaled down. I now have my background placed and in position. I might move things around later on. Now, we no longer need this empty layer, so I'm just going to throw this one away. And then you'll see this little icon here. When we place, the default is to treat this as a smart object. And I don't need this to be a smart object, so let's go ahead and right click, and we should be able to rasterize the layer. We can also do this same process in our layer menu. Now we will place what will be the focal point of our cinemagraph. And I'm going to use this old, rusted, abandoned steam train. And the concept is there's no way this thing can run, but it's still going to have steam coming from it, as if it is mysteriously still running, still operating. All right, so I'm going to point out, you can probably see the marching ants. I've done a selection. I've dropped out most of the background. I've kept this part of the background because it will actually blend in really well with our desert scene. And just to point out, if I go to channels, you can see the original selection which I made. And then this selection right below, it's very subtle, but I just smoothed out the selection and then contracted the selection and then added just a slight feather just to soften the selection up. So all right, so we'll go back to our RGB composite, we'll go back to our layers, and in this case I'm just going to copy paste from this file into our main cinemagraph. So let's go ahead and, oh, and before I do so, I should mention that I also did a color match. My train will be a similar color palette to the background which we're going to place it. So let's go ahead and copy. Let's go to our cinemagraph and we will paste. And here's our train. So I'm just going to scale this down like so. We're pretty close right here. Let's go ahead and commit. And I want the train, this is an interesting direction, and I could, actually I kind of like this direction, but I'm going to go ahead and change it. So let's go to Edit, Transform, just so we can look at as many tools as possible here. And let's go ahead and flip horizontal. And I'm going to position my train like so, right here. And that's pretty good. I could probably make this a little smaller because I want some smoke to come out of the smokestack. So I want to make sure I have some room for that. So let's make our train just a little smaller like so. We'll set. And I'm going to rename my layer train hyphen KO. KO stands for knockout, meaning we knocked out the background. Now let's go ahead and zoom in just a little bit. And you'll see I just happen to have the playhead over here. So I'm going to go back to 0 in time, and then I'll move the train. Okay, so we have a duration right now of 5 seconds, which is the default duration. Okay, so there's a couple of things that we need to do to fix our train, and we'll do that next. And when I say fix the train, just a couple of little touch-ups in these areas right here, meaning inside the empty boiler. Let's go ahead and zoom in on the boiler, the top part of the boiler, and this part up here, the top part of the boiler, is actually part of the old train, but it just doesn't look right. It looks just like some white artifact pixels. So I'm going to select, I'll just use the polygon lasso tool, 0 on the feather, and we will have a check on anti-alias. And I'm going to start outside of the area and then come in. And I want to stay outside of the white pixels so we don't have a white ghost edge. So I'm just going to stay right at the area where the pixels are gray and not quite white. And then let's come out of this area and we'll come back up and complete our selection. I'm going to make sure I have the train layer selected, and then let's go ahead and delete, then Command D to deselect. And this area right here is a little harsh. We probably could have softened up the edge, but let's go ahead and zoom out. And chances are when we get this really small, it's really not going to be that noticeable. Now let's go ahead and zoom in, and I'm going to fix a couple of areas inside the boiler, and we're going to start with this hole. I just don't want it to be there anymore. It's not necessary. So a good tool to fix the hole here is, let's go over and get the clone stamp tool, and I'm going to set a size. I'll just set this to like 54 pixels just as a start point. The hardness, I'm going to go with 80, so the edge won't be too soft and blurry, nor too hard and create a harsh fix. So this is something that you're just going to have to experiment with. But I'm going to try 80%. My mode is normal, opacity is 100%, the flow is 100%, the aligned is checked, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. And I'm going to be working on the current layer, the train KO layer. All right, so we have a check on align. I'm going to come over here, and we will now see our brush. We could always go back to the panel and change the brush size, or just use the left and right bracket. Left bracket smaller, right bracket larger. And I want my paintbrush to be approximately the size of the area that I'm going to fix. Okay, so we have aligned check. I'm going to place my brush right here and hold the Option key. And this is where I'm going to sample. All right, so if I just click here, you'll see that we see the crosshair. And as I move this, the crosshair is going to stay aligned. All right, so I'm going to do a Command Z. If I click here first, okay, the crosshair now shows up in the same proximity of the brush like in the first selection. Okay, so it's going to stay aligned with the movement of the tool. All right, so I'm going to do a Command Z. If I take the check away, and again, just place the brush right up here, hold the Option key or the Alt key on a PC, click once to sample, and now I'll click above the hole, and you'll see that the crosshair moves with us, okay? Now, let's go ahead and do Command Z. That looks very, very similar. But now I'm going to click down here. So I did this last one, I clicked up here and drug down. Now if I click here, do you see where the crosshair is? The crosshair stayed in the original sample point. So when I now scroll up, okay, you can see that the crosshair will move from that original sample point. Okay, so I'll do a Command Z, and it's not going to matter which one I have on for what I'm doing right now. I'm just going to place the brush right here. We will sample. I'll come over, I'll click once, and done. Now I need this one. It's usually best to go with a bit smaller brush, so let's use our left bracket. We'll make this a little smaller, like so. Let's select in a somewhat proximity so we have similar pixels, and we will fix. The same here. I'm going to zoom in a bit more, and I'll do a sample from right here, and we'll just fix part of this. Okay, now this is a bit problematic because if I click here, then it'll look like we have a chunk out because we're still sampling from over here. So I'm going to just sneak up on fixing this. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller, okay, maybe like so. And now I'm going to sample from right in the area that is the edge of the boiler and then the inside dark color of the boiler. And you're going to see what happens here if I get this right. So I'm going to sample right here below. And now as I move this up, I want to be really careful. Now I'm going to sample from up here and bring this down. You see, what I'm doing is I'm cloning what looks like sort of this border area here. So now let's sample inside and let's just clean up. And when we zoom out, that fix should be nearly impossible to see. All right, now let's work with a layer mask. And what I want to do is I'll just zoom in to this bottom left area of our train. And we could probably get away with this foreground sort of dirt and rock as compared to the background, which looks like baked, cracked desert surface. So let's try to blend the two together a little better. So we're going to select Train KO layer. We're going to go down to the bottom of our panel here for our layers, and we're going to add a layer mask. And you'll see I can select the train, I can select the mask. Right now the two are locked. We could unlock and move the two separate if we wanted to. But at this point, I don't. I want them to stay linked together. So I'm going to make sure that my layer mask thumbnail is selected. I'm going to go over and get the paintbrush, and let's look at our options for the paintbrush. I'll set a size, I don't know, let's just start out, 50, 60, something like that. You can always bring it over and see the exact size, but let's start here. The hardness will be, let's just kind of go mid here, maybe in the mid 50s for the hardness on our brush. Okay. All right. So now we are going to come over to our color chips. I'm going to make sure that I have my default color chips. So white, black. Let's go ahead and reverse the order so we have black. Now you'll notice that the mask is white currently. So if I bring my brush over here and paint, I'm painting black, so I'm creating a mask. And you can see even what we've done right here, just kind of being kind of haphazard and making sure the edge is not straight. That actually looks pretty good. And one could be led to believe that maybe some dirt, some sand sort of blew up against the side of the train here. But let's say you change your mind and you want to experiment a little bit more with this. Let's go back to our color chips and we'll select white. And now come back and just paint your image back. So it's, like no harm, no foul. You just paint it out, paint it back. And if we go with a larger brush, so I'm going to use the right bracket and I make a larger brush, now that blend will probably be even softer. So let's go ahead and switch back to black. And now we can really soften up our edge here because our edge is a bit more feathered. All right. So that's coming out really nice. That works really well. But you can also do some interesting effects by using levels of gray. So you can paint a translucent mask. So if we select sort of a mid-tone gray, and now I come back in here, and you see we're still seeing the cracked earth. But now we get some of the sandy gravel from the original image, and it mixes in, and it just is a little bit more visually believable when we approach it this way. Okay, now what we have now actually blends in pretty good with the background, so I'm just going to leave it as is. Now my train seems to have a light source which is coming from the upper left-hand side, which is not unbelievable. It actually works pretty good with the floor of the desert. Now the background, I like it, but it's a bit dark. So let's just brighten up our background. So I'm going to select desert, and we're going to go down and we are going to get an adjustment layer. So this is a way of creating a non-destructive edit. Now my menu is off the screen here, but I'm going to scroll down and get hue and saturation from the list. And what I want to do is just bring the saturation of the background up a little bit, and maybe just a little on the brightness. And that actually looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and close, and we can open up our layers again. And if we take the eyeball off, our adjustment layer, you can go back and edit these at any time by double clicking. You'll go back to the options, or you can click and drag and throw an adjustment layer away, or in this case just toggle it on and off. But just that little slight change, I believe, brightened up the image and brought the tonal ranges more closely together. So now this orangey, rusty part of the train just seems to go a little better with the mountain in the background. Let's zoom in on this back area, very back part of our train. And this area here was basically some highlights. And just like the highlights in this part of the train are, they might be a little much also, but definitely these white areas back here need to be addressed. So let's look at a couple of things we can do. The first, let's go over to our healing brushes, and I'm going to try the Spot Healing Brush. And we're going to go up to our options for the brush, and whatever, let's just say we'll bring this size up. It doesn't matter, 36. We'll change it later. The hardness, again, I'm going to go with an 80. It's sort of an in-between a hard edge and a soft edge. It's not blurry, it's not going to be harsh. Again, these are things you have to experiment with. The spacing, I'm moving my spacing all the way down. So think of spacing like paint in a brush, when you load a brush with paint, and then you drag that brush across a canvas. And initially you're going to get a really nice stroke of paint. But as that paint is used up, then you start to get a softer edge, you start to get skips. That's what spacing is in this in our window here, okay? All right, so let's say this is a good start. And I want to now make sure I'm selecting my train. And I'm on the train, not on the layer mask for the train, but the actual train layer itself. And let's zoom in so it's a little easier for you to see. And now I'm going to reduce the size of the brush. So I'll just use the left bracket. And the idea is whatever you're going to repair or heal with the brush, you want the brush to be about the same size as what you're going to try to fix. Okay? Now this tool is really simple. All you do is put the brush over the area, click, and let go. Okay? So it's just click and let go. And in this case, we're not, let me zoom out a little bit here. Okay? Because we're so close, we're not really getting the effect that we want. So let's go and choose the healing brush tool instead of the spot healing tool. And now let's take a look at our options, which these all look good as far as size 19, hardness 76, spacing 1. Now I need to make the brush smaller. And this is almost like the clone stamp tool. So I'm going to press and hold the Alt or the Option key, and we're going to sample a certain area. And now we're going to come over here and brush over it. So now if I zoom in and I sample right here, and I might need to sample a little more and just sort of sneak up on this. So I have an area which is, I'm starting to be able to fix this area, okay? So let's select right here, and then we'll just drag across. And I'll select, and I'll drag across again. I'll select, and I'm just mixing these tonal ranges together, like so, okay? Just kind of taking some of that light away, but the colors are staying with a similar color palette. All right, so I'm going to sample from down here and paint over the top. And I'll try that again in a couple places. I'll sample here. And it's close. So what I'm going to try this time is get the clone stamp tool. All right, let's just take a quick look at our settings. 7 pixels, 80%. This time I'm going to bring the opacity down. And you want to always check your different options because who knows what you may have done at a later time and you may have changed something. So just be aware of always to take a look at your options. So let's bring this down to like 84%. And let's reduce the size of our brush a little bit. And maybe I'll select right here. Let's sample. And sample here. And I'm painting over, if you will, but it's not 100%. So it's not so stark. We're allowing the pixels to sort of blend together. So I'm going to sample from this area right here. Start. And right now I have aligned off, which is fine. So I'll sample right up here. Now I'll sample right here. And I'm just bringing these values down a little bit so they're not quite as noticeable. So let's try here, and we're just getting rid of some of that white that's in there. Now, this right here is pretty dark, so let's sample right here, and let's sample again, and we're just going to build over this area. And let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this one here. All right, now let's go ahead and zoom out. And when we make our train really small, this back area isn't nearly as noticeable anymore. I went ahead and did the same technique using the spot healing brush, the clone healing brush, and also the clone stamp in this area here. And when we zoom out, you can see that a lot of that white contrast that was sort of drew attention to itself is now gone. All right, let's use the spot healing brush in one more area here. So I'm going to make, this time I'm going to select the desert, and we're going to zoom in. And I'm not sure if this is a road, a path, a scratch. I'm not sure what this is, but we're going to take the spot healing brush. Let's go ahead and just up the size a little bit. We'll keep the hardness at about 80%, the spacing at 1. And then these settings across the top, these are the default settings. They should be fine. And I'm going to reduce the size of the brush. And I want the brush to be about the size of the area that I want to repair. And all we need to do is click and drag. And you'll see how the area is blended with the pixels that are around it. And it makes for a really seamless repair. So let's just go ahead. And I think it's best, I've read that it's best to make sure the brush is about the size of what you're trying to repair, and that it's best to go in short little strokes here. You'll get likely a better repair. And let's just go up. We'll even fix this part like right up here. And now let's zoom out, and it's as if that line was never there. I added a video file of a special effect of smoke. And now we're getting to the part of animating our cinemagraph. So we have our background, our desert, our mountain. We have this old, rusted, abandoned steam train, steam locomotive. And we're going to start to bring this back to life. It's going to be like the ghost train. And when I brought this video file in, I'm going to go ahead and zoom out a little right down here. And I can see that this video is roughly 7 seconds long. So I'm going to extend the train, and I'm going to have my train be all my still graphics. Let's extend these for right now to 10 seconds. And we'll bring our desert over to 10 seconds. And I believe that is all of, those are our files that we're working with. Okay, so if I drag the playhead, I'll see my smoke. All right. And what I want is this black area to go away. So I'm going to select the smoke layer. And this is a special effect that you can create in 3D programs. You can create in After Effects. You can actually even create smoke inside of Photoshop with a little bit of work. But if you have access to a program that uses or has any kind of particle elements, then you can easily make smoke. Of course, you could always just set up a video, set up a shoot, and film your own smoke shot. Now this happens to have a black background, which is representative of something like an alpha channel. And what we can do is come up to our screen modes here, and with our smoke selected, I'm going to try lighten, and then there's screen. So let's try lighten, and now there's our smoke. But the smoke has sort of a 3D effect. So let's change lighten to screen. And that looks a whole lot better. Okay, so I'm going to scale my smoke down a little bit, and let's move the playhead. I have to commit that. Let's move the playhead, and let's say right about there. I'm trying to get this area at the bottom. This is going to be where the smoke begins. And I want to make sure that my smoke layer is behind the train. So when we move this up, like so, okay, and now when we go back to the beginning, there's our smoke coming out, and then our smoke fades away. Now, I have a decision to make. Do I want to make the train smaller and have the stack below the ridgeline of the mountain, or is that enough visual information to get the idea that our train is come to life? And I would say I'm going to leave it as is. It's probably pretty good. But as I get to the end where the smoke fades away, right here, matter of fact, the smoke is gone at this point. All right, so but what happens is we see some of the smoke coming out of the side of our stack. So I'm just going to go to the smoke layer and add a mask to the layer. Then we'll go over and get a paintbrush. Let's take a look at the size of our brush. We'll bring the size down, the hardness. This is smoke, so we could probably keep like in the 60s for the hardness, and that's 35 is probably a good size on the brush. Let's just take a quick look. Opacity 100%, flow, smooth, all this looks okay. So let's go and get our color chips, go back to the defaults, and then bring black. And I'm going to make sure that I have my mask layer, part of the layer selected. And I'm just going to paint out this part of the smoke. And now we'll play, and we're not seeing that part, okay? Now I want my smoke to fade away. So I'm going to open the transformers for the smoke layer, and you will see that we can set keyframes for we can transform, we can opacity, style, we can animate layer mask positions. All I want to do is work with opacity. So I'm going to see, I'm dragging the playhead down the timeline, and the smoke is pretty much gone at this point right here. So I'm going to maybe come to make the playhead go to 5 seconds, 15 frames, and we'll add a keyframe. So I'll click right on the stopwatch, and we will add a keyframe at 5 seconds, 15 frames. And if we go up and we're selecting now our smoke layer, and we can see that our opacity is 100%. So I'm going to drag the playhead to 6 seconds, 15 frames. We'll come over and we will add another opacity keyframe. This time we'll go up to our opacity and bring the opacity down to 0. So it fades away. Matter of fact, we might not want this to fade completely away, but we want this to be pretty subtle. So I'm going to go with 60% right now. So within a second, we will go from 100% opacity down to 60% opacity. So at this point, we have an animation that looks like this. Let's go ahead and I'm going to set the playback here to loop, and then let's just play, and there's our smoke, and our smoke fades away. But then it goes away completely. Now what we want is we want the smoke to keep puffing out of the smokestack. We now have the smoke coming out of the smokestack, but we now need to create the magic part, the illusion part, where there is an endless loop of smoke puffing out of the smokestack. So let's first, I noticed that my smoke effect was between the desert and the adjustment layer, which really doesn't hurt anything, but I'm just going to move this up one layer. And now what we're going to do is make a copy of our effects, and we're going to have the smoke puff out every 2 seconds. And this cinemagraph happens to be 10 seconds long, so we'll have 5 puffs of smoke, I believe. So let's just move this one. This is our copy. And you could probably rename the layers. And I can't see the names over here with the size of the window, but you would probably want to rename the layers so it's very clear which one you're working with, and you'll see here in a little bit. Okay, so let's take our smoke, and we're going to copy this one more time. We'll move the playhead to 4 seconds, like so. We'll copy again. We'll move the playhead to 6 seconds. And don't worry, the timeline's getting kicked down here. We'll trim our layers here in a moment. So let's copy one more time. We will go to 8 seconds, and we'll move our 4th copy. Now I'm just going to scroll down the timeline here and place the playhead at 10, and let's bring the trim, the out points, back like so. And one more, like so. Then I'm just going to bring the timeline up and make sure that none of the other layers are going past, and we should be good. All right, let's go ahead and just bring our canvas down a little bit. Let's save, and let's play our animation, and we have a loop going, so let's play. And everything looks pretty good so far, and this is set to loop. So far we look pretty good. And then that's not right. We need to fix, when we loop, we need the end of our animation to look exactly like the beginning of our animation. And that will give us, when we leave off and then we come back to the beginning and return at what appears to be the same smoke, then the effect will be seamless. So how do we do this? Well, let's go ahead and stop our animation, and we're going to need a lot more of the timeline to see exactly what's going on. So I'm going to open copy 3, okay, and let's open copy 2. All right, and we'll open this one here also. Okay, so what's happening is we see these keyframes here, all right? So what we need to do is, because the animation starts here, and then when we end, we're at this point of the animation for copy 4. We're at this point of the animation for copy 3, and we have just a little bit of the fade left in copy 2. And if we go down to the beginning, to our first smoke here, okay, we'll see this is our start point, all right? So we need this, where we leave off here, we need this over here so we can see the rest of it. The same as when we leave off here, we need this over here so we can see the rest. And the same is true here. So we're going to begin by making, and I can close these down. We no longer need to see them, and that'll give us a little more space. So I'm going to select copy 4, and we're going to make yet another copy. And this one will be drugged down, and we want the end of our smoke to be the beginning of our smoke at the beginning of the timeline. So I'm just going to take the out point and allow us to see the rest of the video. Okay, now don't worry, it fades out as the other ones fade out right here. Okay, so everything should blend together just fine. So we made another copy of copy 4. We moved it down, and then we opened up the duration. I need to do the same with number 3. So I'm going to select smoke copy 3 and make a copy. We'll bring this one down so the end is our beginning, like so, and then we will extend the duration. And we need to do the same for copy 2. So I'm going to select copy 2 and make a copy. We'll bring this one back so the end of it, where it was ending, is our beginning now. And then we will extend our duration. Let's go ahead and save. We'll bring our timeline down, and we can just do a quick toggle back and forth. So if I have the playhead here at the end, just have a kind of a mental note of where the smoke is, and then we'll go to the beginning. End, beginning, end, beginning. It's pretty close. All right, so let's go ahead and make sure we are on loop. And let's test our animation. And when we get to the end, and then we go back to the beginning and get our puff of smoke, we should now have a seamless loop. So we'll let that play one more time. So we're coming up on the end, going back to the beginning right there, and that loop works out pretty darn well. To push the illusion just a little bit further, I added a few things. So let's take a look. The first, I'm going to hide the train, and you'll see that I made a copy. So let's zoom in here. I made a copy of the smokestack, and I made a selection, and the area of the smokestack that's rusted out, I just cut that away. So now the smoke looks like it's inside the smokestack. So it's a simple little touch, but I think it adds just a little bit more. So let's turn the train back on, And next, what I've done is taken all of the smoke that's in the smokestack and collected this into a single folder. And what's nice is it makes it a lot easier to move things around or scale all of the smoke puffs separately. I'm sorry, as one. And then also, if we look at our layers, we can see now that all of these layers for the smoke are collapsed, which is pretty nice. All right, so let's move our layers back down again. And then we will zoom out and talk a little bit more about what else we've added here. Okay, so we have the smoke now as it's inside the smokestack. And then I added, I'm going to turn the train back off. Well, actually, let's turn the train back on. And I added smoke that will come out the opposite side. Smoke, this is actually steam. So it's pretty common on a steam train, steam locomotive, especially before they get going, they start to release steam to bleed off pressure. So now I have some steam coming out the other side of the train, and we just see the steam a little bit and then it fades away. So it adds just a little more like this thing's coming to life. All right, now I'm going to turn the train and the steam on the other side off for a moment and just point out that I have steam mask 1, 2, and steam mask 3. So if I zoom in on these, I just made selections on some side parts of the train where I thought some steam coming through the sides would look kind of cool. So now if we turn the train back on and off, you can see where those pieces are in relationship, and they blend in really nicely. So let's turn our steam back on for the opposite side, and then I have some steam that will come out the back part right there. Okay, and I could probably fix this area right there. I should probably fix that area, but I didn't notice it before, but now that I'm zoomed in, I do notice it. So I'll take care of that later. Let's go ahead and turn on the next part of steam, which comes out this part of the train. And let's zoom out a little bit. And if I just scrub over time here, you'll see now that we have the steam coming out the sides of the train, which again makes it kind of a, the illusion that this old rusted abandoned train out in the middle of nowhere has somehow had some life breathed back into it. So the last step is rendering our video from the project. So we'll go up to File, Export, and Render Video. And on the presets, so we want to make sure our format is H.264, and go ahead and select a folder where you're going to save your file. And then again, your file should be named with your last name -cinemagraph, and this one is going to be an MP4. On the presets, I went ahead and selected YouTube high definition, 720p progressive, 29.97. Now we could probably save a little bit of size and go with 25 frames per second, and you might want to explore. You might want to try some other settings, but this should work out pretty well. And basically these settings also echo the document setting which we started with. All right, so we're going to render all frames. All these other defaults can remain, and you would click render. and then you just wait for the video to render. Now I've already done this, so I'm just going to cancel, and let's take a look at our train. So I'm just opening the MP4 file inside of a web browser. You can right-click and set loop, and now we can see our 10-second duration cinemagraph of our abandoned train being brought back to life.